It's time.
Eagles Entertainment.
The journey to the draft is driven by AAA. AAA, roadside is their strong side. Make AAA a part of your game day today. AAA, go ahead.
With the 25th pick in the NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select.
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. I'm your host, Fran Duffy, and we've got another big week of college football action to recap here on the show. The SEC back on the field this week, which was great to see. It felt like a normal Saturday afternoon. Pac-12 on the horizon. Hopefully we'll get our Saturday late nights back here. We'll have some late Saturday night Pac-12 after dark, which would be great to be able to watch. If you're a college football fan, you certainly feel what I'm feeling about that. We're going to start things off here this week with Saturday scouting. Myself, Ben Fennell, Dane, Brugler, we're going to get our reactions from what we saw on Saturday afternoon and Saturday evening, how that will all impact the NFL draft. We'll talk all through that in Saturday scouting. After that, on the clock, Chris McPherson's going to come back for the show. Again, he will serve as judge and jury for our big debate segment with Ben, Dane, and I. Top of this week, who is the top pass rusher in this draft? We'll talk all about that in On the Clock. And after that, we've got a question from you at home in our draft mailbag segment. But before we get the show started, quick reminder, if you can go on to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, throw us your support. This is the best way to do it. Go on to one of those platforms, wherever you listen, leave us a rating, leave us a comment. If you leave us a question, we'll answer it here on the show. I promise, it's as good as gold. I will always answer your questions here on the show. If you've got a mock draft, we will cover it here as well. Just go on, leave that rating, leave that comment. That being said, let's get things started here. It's time for Saturday Scouting.
It's time for Saturday Scouting.
All right, well, let's get things going here on Saturday Scouting as I welcome in both Ben Fennell and Dane Brugler back to the show. Guys, we got some SEC football this weekend. It was a lot of fun, a little bit more of a full slate of college football. We also got the news that the Pac-12 on the way back, the MAC on the way back. Just great news all around. And last week we talked about who are the players that we're excited to see from the Big Ten. We're not going to necessarily go through that with the Pac-12 and the MAC, but just great to hear that college football, getting closer and closer to being all systems go across the country, Dane.
This past Saturday felt a little bit more like college football Saturday with the SEC back, and then it's only going to ramp up even more when we get the Big Ten and then the Pac-12 and the MAC, and it's going to make for some interesting debates when we talk about the college football playoff and each of these teams and conferences having different resumes and things like that. But we don't know how many games each of these teams are going to play, but we're getting something. And that's something to be thankful for when, not too long ago, we weren't sure if we're going to see any college football this fall. So I was very thankful for what we saw this past Saturday and for whatever we get the rest of the fall, because it's going to be more tape to watch, another opportunity to see these players. And, with the SEC back, certainly a lot more prospects worth checking out and seeing if they got any better this year.
Now that we have one weekend under our belt of the SEC play, how do you guys feel about the SEC conference-only schedule? We're not going to have those random Mercer or, Citadel games mixed in there. I know every now and then they like to schedule a non-conference, even November, late in the season. I always find those highlights on the melts I have to use for their draft coverage, XOs. Love seeing, Charleston Southern, and those types of teams. How do you guys feel about the conference-only matchups?
Well, I'll tell you this. The big thing that I saw over the weekend was that Nick Saban came out, obviously the head coach of Alabama, said that he is in favor of the 10-game SEC schedule being a permanent fixture. If he says that's big. Carries a lot of weight moving forward. So hopefully, I don't want to speak for both of you guys. Hopefully that carries, because that'd be awesome for all of us.
I feel like it's a little bit of a clearer picture of the prospects in the evaluation model. You don't have those kind of throwaway games and the barn burner games that are paychecks for the smaller schools. I think it just paints a slightly more focused kind of evaluation on some of these players.
Who's voting against it is my question. Who doesn't want to see these good against good and seeing a conference go up against the other heavyweights? Because I'm tired of not being able to see some of these crossover games, East versus the West, for all these years. Let's see more conference games. Let's see these guys beat each other up and get a better chance to evaluate these players.
Yeah, and I think too that we'll see what they do with those out of conference games. But if you can say, all right, we'll carry one cupcake along with one solid out of conference, and I feel like there are a lot of schools that continue to do that. That would be a great formula moving forward. So certainly some big news there from the SEC. I thought that was good. Thanks for pointing that out, Ben. So as far as opt-out news, one big player over the weekend, a player that we've talked about here on the show during our Pac-12 preview, and that's Oregon safety Javon Holland. Ben, I'll go to you first. Thoughts on the news that Javon Holland, the very productive player over the last couple of years for Oregon, only a sophomore last year, obviously going into his junior season, but we have seen the last of Javon Holland in Eugene. What are your thoughts on him declaring for the draft?
Just collectively, I'm kind of okay with it because Oregon was so deep at defensive back, tons of seniors, up and coming young kids, Mikkel Wright at corner. There just wasn't enough snaps to go around. So, with Thomas Graham, I think, declaring, and Lenore, and now Holland, I thought they put enough on tape, to evaluate, know what they are, know where they are in the draft, and, kind of move on with their careers.
Verone McKinley, that's the name to watch, because I feel like he's the guy that's going to step into that.
He was a free safety last year.
Yep, and I think he's got that same skill set that Holland has. He's the guy that I'm most excited to see, Dane.
Well, and I was kind of the opposite. I wanted to see more of Holland just because I'm not convinced what type of athlete he is. I think he's a good athlete, but is he a great athlete? That's where I'm just not sure yet. I think he's a very smart player. I think he's quick to read, react, and quick to diagnose. But this is a player who I don't know. I really am not – I don't feel great about the athleticism, and can he be truly – because he plays a lot on nickel for the Ducks. Can he truly be a nickel at the next level where he's going to be asked to cover in the slot and he can be held accountable man-to-man and things like that? So the lack of elite athletic traits is something that kind of bothers me. And you don't have to have elite athletic traits at the safety position, but you can't be just average either. I think you have to be, somewhere in the good area. And I'm not convinced that he is there. That was my problem with it over the summer. And it's kind of weird how the Pac-12, they announced they're coming back, and it's kind of like the opposite. We're not seeing a lot of opt-ins.
No, that's true.
We're seeing more guys opt out, where the Big Ten, they come back and we see almost everyone except for a few, Micah Parsons, try to opt back in. So it's just very interesting to see the different dynamic from one conference to another.
And just spinning it back to Oregon, I was chatting with a Oregon buddy over the summer trying to get a lay of the land of the pecking order of that defensive back room. And he's like, oh, yeah, the real up-and-comer is going to be this Bennett Williams transfer from Illinois. Like, who is Bennett Williams? Another defensive back out there? Another veteran presence in that secondary? Very, very deep back there.
Yeah, and see, I'm interested that you brought that up with Holland, Dane, because I liked his athleticism. I was worried about like the eye discipline and coverage. Like, he did give up some big plays. I just felt like it was more from a mental side as opposed to a physical side. He is an interesting player. Now that we know, like, he's played his last down of college football, I'm going to dig in a little bit deeper and watch a little bit more of the 2019 film and kind of put a final stamp on the evaluation, because we've seen what we're going to see, from Javon Holland. All right, guys, let's get to this past weekend in college football. We mentioned lots of SEC action. Who gets the game ball? Ben, I'll start with you this time. Who gets your game ball here as the standout player from the weekend in the games that you watched?
Oh, guys, there are so many big-time performances, particularly in the SEC and particularly at receiver. It's really tough to choose whether it was Elijah Moore or maybe Shai Smith or Osiris Mitchell. I'm going to go with Jalen Waddle, putting up 8 for 134 and 2 touchdowns in a variety of ways as well. I love the touchdown tracking through double coverage, great ball down the field, adjusting to an underthrown ball and going up and making a big play and taking a hit. And then just the horizontal speed, the crossing route touchdown, very similar to Tyreek Hill's touchdown, I think in week 1, going from left to right in a pure foot race to the sideline, kind of that horizontal speed as well. So there's a lot of questions heading into this year about Jalen Waddle and his acclimate being a true receiver and his ability to run routes, and had to play behind the trio last year. I know Dane thinks very highly of him, has him as wide receiver 2, way ahead of his teammate Devontae Smith, who I think he had wide receiver 5 or 6 at the moment. But Jalen Waddle looks like he's off to a really good start.
Ben, what did you think of Mac Jones?
Mac Jones did what Mac Jones does. Wasn't flashy, wasn't sexy, just distributes the ball to these playmakers, manages the game really well. A lot of really good ball handling in the backfield with some play action aspects, really good allowing the defense to suck up on some screen plays as well. He's not going to wow you, but he's a guy that is going to be toolsy, can get the job done. And I don't know if he's a Nick Foles type of player or not, but I could see him going to the Senior Bowl and really kind of turning some heads.
Yeah, one of my wins in our On the Clock segment was fighting for Waddle as that number 2 receiver. And, I think, to your point, Ben, was he showed a lot more, because I think the argument you get from people about Waddle is, oh, he's just an athlete and, he can a returner, make guys miss, that type of thing. But we saw against Missouri that he's a lot more than just an athlete out there. You saw improved routes. That catch that he made down the field where he took the 2 big hits after he came down with it was impressive. So this guy's got toughness. He showed a little more detail as a route runner. And I'm excited to see what we see the rest of the season from him, because I think Mac Jones, they had a natural connection there. And he's just a really good player. So I think definitely deserved that game ball.
That catch down the field, I swear that was Devontae Smith. That was such a Devontae Smith type of play.
Yeah, you're right.
And him going up and getting in, aggressive at the catch point. And then I stopped and looked, and it was Waddle. I was like, whoa, I've never seen that from Waddle. So a lot of different things he was showing you. I'm really excited to see what he puts on tape in 2020.
Well, and part of it's just opportunity. They were so stacked at receiver last year, obviously, with Judy and Ruggs, that now he's being asked to do these things and having these targets. And so far, he hasn't disappointed.
Dane, who did you give your game ball to?
So, coming into the season, I wrote about this. I mentioned it on this podcast. The chances of us having a Joe Burrow-like ascension from a prospect wasn't going to happen. But if there was a quarterback who saw maybe 25, maybe even 50% of such a rise, Kyle Trask was going to be that guy, and mostly because of the trajectory. When you consider he barely played in high school as De'Aaron King's backup, and then he finally gets on the field for the Gators last year and played well. Now you give him a full offseason, finally gets, to be the guy. He's a clear-cut starter. You sprinkle in some good coaching, even though I have some gripes with Dan Mullen. He can coach quarterbacks. We know that. So then you look at the supporting cast with Kyle Pitts and Kadarius Toney and Trevon Grimes, and I'm buying all the Trask stock. And based off his performance versus Ole Miss, I'm glad I did, because what I love most about him, this is what he showed against the Rebels, natural passing skills. He understands touch. He understands trajectory. He understands timing. And he did a really nice job recognizing pressures, understanding where to go with the football. So to be fair, I do think that there's a ceiling on his game, and I have my concerns about his next level transition. But we saw all the strengths that he has on Saturday. Went 30 for 42, 416 yards, 6 touchdowns, no interceptions. And I know people are going to say, did you see that Ole Miss defense? But in a season like this, where hopefully we get a full season, but we just don't know, every game matters. And Trask put up a pretty impressive performance on Saturday.
Dane, when he started that sentiment and said we weren't sure if we were going to see another Joe Burrow, kind of a lightning in a bottle transfer, I thought we were going to maybe talk about KJ Costello for a second there. And then I forgot about old Kyle Trask down there at Florida.
Yeah, Costello had obviously a crazy debut. In that
My question, Fran, I want to know if Mike Leach said to him what he said to Minshew. Do you want to go be a backup at Alabama, or do you want to lead the country in passing? Type of sales pitch to him, and right off the bat, 600 yards, and looks like he's on his way.
I feel like we undersold Costello a little bit. It didn't talk about the skill set that he showed at Stanford, because especially early in his career, I liked what I saw from Costello. I mean, we know that system is what is the engine that puts those numbers up. But obviously, a really impressive debut, huge upset win.
I'm just happy to not watch paint dry in that offense anymore. We've already seen the Nick Fitzgerald, the Dak Prescotts, those type of offenses. I'm ready to throw this thing around the yard to some of those athletes, and I know the receivers in that Mississippi State room are ready to get the ball too, because they've been starving for some targets for a couple of years.
How about Kylan Hill, who had more catches than he did rush attempts? And I know, Ben, you mentioned this a few times, how Kylan Hill could be one of the benefactors of this offense. And so far with one game, that was certainly the case.
And it's part of the scheme. That's kind of what Mike Leach does in his air raid offense. It's kind of a force feed into the backs, but also Osiris Mitchell, 7 for 183, 2 touchdowns. Kylan Hill, 8 for 155.
Shavers.
Obviously somebody had to dominate with 600 yards of, passing there. So just good to see them get some numbers in the pass game.
I haven't studied those receivers yet, but Dane, you mentioned Shavers, Cyrus Mitchell. I mean, those guys, I mean, they look the part. They look excited to play in this scheme. I'm excited.
I haven't watched a Mississippi State receiver since like Darunya Wilson, like
I know.
6 years ago.
It's been a while, no question. So I'm going to go right off of Dane. My game ball goes to one of the top weapons there for Kyle Trask, and that's the tight end, Kyle Pitts. 8 catches, 170 yards, 4 touchdowns. And we saw the full gamut of types of receptions here for Kyle Pitts. We saw back shoulders. We saw catch and runs. We saw vertical throws. This guy's detached. He lines up in line. He's not the biggest guy, and he's not going to be dominant at the point of attack as a blocker, but he's not terrible in those scenarios either. I think you look at Kyle Pitts, and they were saying on the broadcast, they're talking about, like Travis Kelce and George Kittle and those guys. Like, I even think of like, all right, well, because a lot of people will point to Evan Ingram, and Ingram hasn't quite worked out in the NFL in terms of what that draft status was. But what about Darren Waller, right? Like, in terms of being like a high volume target for an NFL offense, and with his athletic gifts, I mean, he was really, really impressive. And not just from an athletic standpoint, but just his ability to play the ball in the air and finish at the catch point. I mean, 8 for 170 and 4 touchdowns. Like, you're catching my attention if you're anybody, much less a tight end in the SEC.
That's who DJ compared him to. And I think it makes a lot of sense because he is 240, maybe 245. And so doesn't necessarily have that prototypical build for a 6'6" tight end, but man, what a weapon. And with Jamar Chase, opting out, now I think it's between Pitts and Waddle as to the best offensive prospect in the SEC. And those guys, they're going to be duking it out the rest of the season. Pitts was number 11 overall on my top 50 board, tight end 1, and he certainly didn't disappoint.
All right, well, let's go to our one-play takeaway. One play that we're going to remember and take with us here moving forward into the pre-draft process. Dane, I'll go to you first for this one.
Divine Diablo, such a great name. Virginia Tech, they were down 23 players this week, down 4 coaches against NC State, and they still boat raced NC State on Saturday. Jumped out to a quick 10-0 lead, and then mid-first quarter, Divine Diablo made a fantastic interception that gave the Hokies the ball in plus territory. It was man coverage versus a slot receiver, quickly read the out route, drove on the route simultaneously with the receiver, undercut the ball path, made a diving interception. He's not just a great name. He also has that frame, 6'3", 225 pounds. And he's also a very smart player with the way he can identify routes. He quickly understands what the offense is doing. He'll trust his eyes. So that really allows him to make plays, and it showed up on that interception.
So for me, and I haven't done Diablo yet. I'm excited to dig deeper into his tape. We mentioned earlier he is the one of the official prospects for the Journey to the Draft podcast because he was discovered by our own producer, Peter Kelly. But let's move forward to my pick here. And I talked about one tight end from the SEC in that Florida Ole Miss game. I'm going to go to the tight end on the other side, and that's Kenny Yeboah from Ole Miss. The transfer from Temple, went to Baylor, was there for a month or so, and then transferred once that staff left. I think when you look at Yeboah, I have heard about him ever since he arrived at Temple. I know that staff was really high on him early. He's received high marks in the past for his blocking and shown flashes as a pass catcher. I'll tell you what, some of the drives late in that game, especially there was one early in the fourth quarter, that offense funneled through Yeboah. He had like 3 catches, including the touchdown, to end the drive. I think when you look at what Lane Kiffin was able to do with Harrison Bryant and kind of make him the focal point of that offense last year at FAU, I wonder if there's a little bit of something in the mix here for Kenny Yeboah. Again, a guy who has previously been known more as a blocker, but he's got some athletic traits. He made a catch on a vertical route. The touchdown was an athletic little catch and run where he dove for the pylon. I saw some good things from Kenny Yeboah, Ben. I know you tweeted about him over the weekend too.
Yeah, he's a fun player, kind of a gadgety H-back type. And if the NFL values guys like Josiah DeGuara, I don't see a whole lot of difference in Kenny Yeboah. Similar type of role, ability, perimeter blocking, not going to blast any defensive ends at the point of attack, but use him in space, use him on the perimeter, use him on the move, and he can make a couple nice catch like he did on that wheel route, or he had a nice over-the-shoulder catch for a touchdown last year against ECU maybe. I can't remember. But I'll stay on the defensive side of the ball. Dane on another interception. Jabril Cox making his debut for LSU. Coming from North Dakota State in the unfortunate loss to Mississippi State. But he did have a highlight play with a pick 6. Man coverage against the tight end, had to flip his hips, drive on the ball, undercut the tight end. ran it back 20 yards for a touchdown. I think that's what you expected from Jabril Cox, more of an upside in the pass game, still learning and kind of sifting through his run keys and playing in the box against the run. But he's going to be a great third down linebacker for NFL teams. And I thought he showed it off right there in man coverage.
Dude, you were all over the matchup last week when we previewed that game between LSU and Mississippi State. Not only did you talk about Kylan Hill and what he can do as a pass catcher, but talking about Jabril Cox and coverage and that was a hell of a play on that pick six and his ability to kind of feel that and obviously make the play on the ball and then finish. Really, really impressive stuff from Jabril Cox there. The more I was kind of watching that game and just kind of seeing his body type and watching him move around, I kind of got like vibes of like a Darius Leonard, guys. Just the way that he's built and the way that he moves. I mean, and I know that's
he's
high
long
praise,
and lean, Fran. Those arms hang down to obviously past his quads, almost to his knees there. Long limb guy. He's tall, has that kind of tight waist. He moves really well, explosive speed.
I'll tell you what, just the fact that he transferred up like he did, like he could have been the big fish in a small pond, stayed at North Dakota State, and still would have been a day 2 draft pick. He transfers up, and I love his response when asked, well, why do that? Why not stay put? He said, well, because then I wouldn't get any better. He felt like he did all he could at North Dakota State, and he transferred up to challenge himself, not worried about draft status, and where he just wanted to get better. And he's going to earn a lot of bonus points for scouts with that alone. But then, you also watch him play, and he's a pretty darn good player.
And Fran, just to paint the full picture, you see a little Darius Leonard. I actually wrote down Fred Warner. Similar type of player at BYU, played out in space quite a bit, sometimes detached over slot receivers, just like Cox did at North Dakota State. And Warner's really carved out to be a nice will linebacker for the Niners.
No question. We'll be talking a lot about Fred Warner this week on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Later this week, obviously the Eagles preparing to take on Warner and the San Francisco 49ers. Let's go to our down the road freak show. A young player not eligible for this draft, but just a name to kind of keep stowed away for the future. Dane, I'll go to you. Start with this one off.
I'm going with Henry To'o. This guy was a top 5 recruit nationally, came down to Tennessee and Alabama for the linebacker. And this is a California native, so he was going to SEC country. He chose the Vols, and he made an immediate impact last year as a true freshman, was on the SEC all-freshman team. He had 72 tackles, and he picked up right where he left off this year in Tennessee's opener. He had a pick 6 tackles against South Carolina in the win. The interception was a little bit of a gift. It was a throw slightly behind Shi Smith that bounced into his hands. So the interception was a little bit of a gift. But the 32-yard return for a touchdown that he had, that's what really stood out. He trucked Shi Smith and then tight-roped the sideline the rest of the way. He's a pretty impressive player. He shows shed skills, the range, the toughness. I think he's one of the cornerstones of what Pruitt is trying to build down there in Knoxville. So pretty impressive showing from the true sophomore.
I didn't know much about him. I'd heard the name, didn't know much about the profile, and I didn't watch the game. So interested to see, go back and watch the highlights from that one for sure. Ben, who's your down the road freak show here?
Yeah, I actually plugged him in last year. I did BYU Tennessee, and it always pained me to write a 2001 birthday in the prospect notes. He's a young kid. He's from the De La Salle powerhouse in California. He's half Samoan, half Tongan. I think that's exactly the mix that you need at linebacker these days. Just what you need. But this kid, I had to look up for UCF over the weekend. This small little receiver, Jalen Robinson, had 9 for 160 and 2 touchdowns against ECU. The week before, had 6 for 105 against Georgia Tech. He's 5'9", 163. So we're talking Tutu Atwell, Hollywood Brown, Deshaun Jackson type of player. 4 for 4 catching the ball down the field. He's a 4-star Oklahoma transfer. This is a big-time athlete that everybody wanted in the country, ended up transferring. I'm not sure why. Has a couple drop issues, 3 drops on 21 targets this year. Don't know anything about this kid. Small, fast, electric. I think he's only a sophomore right now. Might be a redshirt sophomore, but he looks like he could boogie.
Well, the guy that I went with, and Ben, there's a reason why I asked you about Mac Jones earlier. I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts because the guy behind him in quarterback Bryce Young for Alabama, the true freshman, guys, like don't take this the wrong way. He has like a Kyler Murray level skill set, right? I mean, he's definitely on the shorter side. I mean, they said like, he's probably under 5'11", under 5'10" on the broadcast. But this kid has got a whip for an arm. You could see the athleticism. I'm really intrigued to see how long Mac Jones is able to kind of keep him at bay, and if it is for the whole season, or if they do kind of stumble on offense at all, if they decide to go to Bryce Young. This kid is gifted, so I'm excited to watch. To me, Bryce Young is like, all right, like if it's garbage time for Alabama and, they're up by 30 points in the fourth quarter, I'm not changing the channel. Like, I'm staying put just to see get more eyes on Bryce Young. He really caught my eye watching the end of that game against Missouri.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, Fran. We might not be getting those fourth quarter junk times anymore. You might not be able to play a whole half against Mercer.
Yeah, well, he needed it against Missouri. Like, what happens if they play Vanderbilt or anybody on the lower end of the SEC? We could end up seeing them more often than not.
You're saying Mac Jones is destined to transfer after the season as a grad transfer and
go to Oklahoma, replace Spencer
right.
Rattler.
That's
Rattler
what I
has
heard,
to
Dane.
go.
That's what I heard.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
We mentioned Spencer Rattler, so of course we have to mention QB1, which you can find on Netflix. Ben, I'll throw that in there for you, guys. This was good stuff. Before we wrap things up, though, I got to get to our film room recap. Just a guy that we've studied on film over the last week that's kind of caught our eye. I'll start things off for this one, and I'm going to go with the guy that Dane, I know you were very, very high on. I believe he was your number one running back in the summer.
Just ahead of ETN.
Yeah, this is Penn State's Journey Brown, and this kid is very, very intriguing, guys, because when you look at the dynamic athlete that he is at 5'11", over 215 pounds, this is a player that's really intriguing. He's got electric time speed. Bruce Feldman had said that he's in the sub 4.3 range. When you're talking about him on the stopwatch, I still think at the end of the day, he's probably still, and I know that this was written about him, that he's trying to kind of get over that precipice of being more football player than track athlete. And I still think at times it's trending the other way. But man, like if you get this kid in the right kind of system, what he can be as both a runner and as a pass catcher, really, really impressive. And he's even a pretty assignment sound in pass pro. So I wouldn't say that he's a throwaway there either. High upside. I'm very interested to watch a little bit more of Journey Brown and see him with another year. You had said that you were really excited to see him, Dane, with another year of action here in the Big Ten, another year of development. Well, I'm 100% in that boat because, with what I saw from him last year as a sophomore, where he was basically platooned, where they had a couple of other young backs and he was not a full-time player. I'm excited to see, what he looks like with another year.
Exactly. And then, towards the end of last year, they finally kind of woke up and were like, okay, we need to get him more touches. And he became more of the guy down the stretch. And you watch him against Memphis and the end of the year, and he was just clicking. And so, how does he look catching the ball out of the backfield? How does he look in pass protection? How does he look, with some of the running back specific things going on? I can't wait to see his development this year.
Who's your guy you want to cover here, Dane?
I went with Tommy Tremble, tight end from Notre Dame. So, he's a guy that needs to be on the radar.
Is that number 24, Dane?
Yeah. And the Irish, obviously, they are always stacked at tight end. They've got a pipeline going to the NFL, 6'4", 250, good routes, good ball skills, but he actually likes blocking more than receiving, and it shows on his tape. He loves to get after it, the competitive toughness, the physicality. He just overwhelms guys out there, and I don't know what his final stat line is going to look like at the end of the year, but as a redshirt sophomore, he's going to have an NFL decision to make. He's that good of a combo tight end who can do everything, and he's not going to hurt you out there.
Ben, who's your name here?
So I actually watched 2 games of Duke defensively, wanting to watch Chris Rumpf. And really quick, just going to put the full gamut on Chris Rumpf. Still getting mauled at the point of attack in the run game, playing more snaps, got absolutely worked against Notre Dame right tackle Robert Hainsey a couple times on the edge there, but an electric pass rusher, very loose, good spin moves, counter moves, can rush from depth, really good on the backside of run action, like play action boot, and chasing the quarterback out and pursuing up the field. Okay. Really fast foot speed. But I came away absolutely gushing about Liam Eckenberger, the left tackle in Notre Dame. I noticed Tommy Tremble, tight end number 24, smashing some guys in the run game. But left tackle against Duke was as good a tape as I've seen literally in a calendar year. I need some other guy's opinion on Eckenberger because he doesn't do anything to give me any concerns. Put on that Duke tape, whether it's against Chris Rumpf or that kid 51. Help me with his name, Fran.
Victor Dimukeje.
Thank you very much.
He actually leads college football in sacks right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of an interesting two different body types, Rumpf
very much.
51 there, but Eckenberg, pass-po mirror, quick off the ball, reacting to inside moves, picking up stunts and twists, getting movement in the run game, reaching off the edge, can cut guys on the backside of runs, rarely on the ground. He got beat once or twice with some immediate quickness. And then really quick, watching Duke defensively against Boston College. Woo, Alec Lindstrom at center is a nasty, nasty mauler for that Boston College offensive line. Not afraid to finish, guys. Two very, very fun tapes. Notre Dame offense against Duke, Boston College offense against Duke.
Dude, Lindstrom is such a stud. He's really good. He's very, very good.
Apparently, I just found out he's a host of a podcast as well. So I want to see what he's digging into on a week-to-week basis and seeing what he's talking about on a show.
Do you think he follows a rundown better than you do?
He must. You know, I'm like a 7th round undrafted free.
It's a low bar.
Following the rundown.
Well, guys, this was fun. We're going to keep things going here now, though, because it's time now for our next segment. Let's go on the clock.
On the clock.
All right, well, let's see how this segment goes here on the clock, where overall record right now, we're keeping score. Dane has 2 wins. Ben's got 1. I have not gotten off the schneid yet. I have still yet to win one. Even though I felt like I got the debate last week, I still have 0 points. CMAC is here as judge and jury. Dane, we're going to start this off. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to debate who is the best pure pass rusher in this class. Now, to set the listeners up, I did not say best pure defensive end, the best outside linebacker. All I said was best pure pass rusher. So that being said, CMAC is going to be the judge. Dane, you can start pounding the table for who you feel is the best pure pass rusher here in this draft.
Well, Fran, I have a question for you. Besides Chase Young, do you know who led all of college football in sacks last season?
I have an idea. I believe that would be Miami's Greg Rousseau.
It was Gregory Rousseau. 15 and a half sacks, 6'7", 265 pounds, super long athlete, looks straight out of central casting with that body type, and he's still growing. He'll continue to fill out, develop his frame. He uses those long arms to shoot his hands into blockers, work off contact. He can convert speed to power, detach, find the football. There's no question. He's still learning how to untap his power, set up his moves, but it's because he's new to the position. He was mostly a defensive back and a receiver in high school, and he's making that transition. So, no, he's not yet to some of his parts, but it's the parts that get you really excited and why I think he is the answer to this question. So I'm going to take my chances on a guy who, he's still figuring things out, yet he managed 15 and a half sacks last year just due to the natural gifts. So imagine where he's going to be with more experience as he connects the dots. There's no Chase Young this year. There's no Bosa, but there is a Rousseau, and it's truly an ascending rusher.
First thing I want to start off with, Fran, I want to apologize, not just to you, but to the fans last week. And certainly, Fran, you were very worthy of winning the debate. And Dane, obviously I selected him, did a great job as well. But the reason that I took a little time to think about and a little self-reflection, so to speak, was not so much the quality of the debate, but the fact that Dane complained like a petulant child about not having the first pick beforehand, and then I went along and picked him anyway. So that's my
because he knew in his heart of hearts that Patrick Surtain is the best man-to-man coach. Let's just lay that out. He knew. But let's say, look, we're moving past it.
I had to prepare a little extra harder with my argument, and apparently it worked. So
I had to make you work for it. But I will say the one good thing here is with Rousseau there, the things you sold me on about him there, Dane, the fact that he has the athletic traits and he has production. Because it seems like if you mentioned there the Chase Youngs, the Bosas, the Myles Garretts, all these guys have athletic traits and they have production at the college level. It's rare to not have one or the other making that transition, especially if we're talking about the guy who we think is the best one coming out of college. So nice foundation piece there. Who's number two here?
Well, let me jump in real quick because I have a question for Dane here.
Mm-hmm.
Dane, how many of those 15 sacks do you feel are translatable to how he will be used in the NFL? Because a large amount of those sacks, and Ben, I don't know if you've got the numbers in front of you. I don't have the numbers in front of me. not only did they come off of stunts where they were able to kind of scheme him open, but there were ones where they lined him up as a zero technique over the center. He is not going to be used that way in the NFL, where they basically just said, go ahead, young guy. Just get after the offensive line. I don't feel he's going to be used that way in the NFL. He took advantage of some weaker ACC offensive linemen in that case. He's not a guy that's got an established pass rush plan at this stage of his career. You mentioned the untapped power. Not a guy that's going to collapse into the pocket despite that length, despite those physical tools. I think it's a really interesting debate with a guy that some people, Daniel Jeremiah from NFL Networks thinks he's the best prospect in this draft. There are some people that don't see him that way. It's going to be a very interesting debate with Gregory Rousseau.
Dane, I love the sub-package usage. The Houston Texans have no problem putting Whitney Mercilus at the zero technique, or the Packers putting Zadarius Smith. I love him playing up and down the D-line.
And I think it's the length. That's when I watched him, that's what really stood out more than any other trait. His ability to use that length so he could detach from blocks, find the football, and make plays. So, it's funny because when you put out this question, the best pure pass rusher, that means something different, I think, to a lot of different people.
Yep.
It's just and so for me, I went with the guy that I thought is going to get to the quarterback, that I feel like can get to the quarterback better than anybody else. And with his gifts, with the natural tools, that length, I'll put my money on Rousseau over anybody else.
All right, well, Ben, you are next up here in this order for this week. Who is your pick here for the top pass rusher in this class?
Well, because it means something to everybody else, really quick, C-Mac, we're talking pure get up in the morning, manufactured quarterback hunter. This could be the worst run defender in the country, but this guy gets up in the morning ready to hunt quarterbacks, and that's Chris Rump II out of Duke. He's 6'3", 230, wildly undersized, wildly inefficient against the run, wildly a part-time player because of that. But let's spin this back to Chase Young. Like Dane had brought up, Rousseau had more sacks than him, but Chris Rump led the country in win rate and pressure rate last year, better than Chase Young. Now, why didn't we hear about that? Because the number of snaps he played didn't qualify. Now, I'm not going to tell you what his win rate was or the pressure rate because that really doesn't mean anything. But this is a guy that showed up against Miami, had 14 pressures, 31 reps. Dominant pass rusher. Needs to add a lot of weight, but because of that, he's very loose, very flexible. They rush him from all over the place. They'll rush him from the linebacker spot. They'll mug him up against guards and try to isolate him against some bigger offensive linemen. Great in stunts and twists, has counter moves, spin moves, can run the arc. An electric pass rusher. Not to mention, C-Mac, his dad is Chris Rump, outside linebacker coach of the Houston Texans, previously worked with Alabama, Texas, Clemson. So this guy has the technique, has the coaching, has the dad kind of coaching pedigree as well. This guy gets up in the morning and hunts quarterbacks. Going to be a terrible player against the run, but he'll be a third down quarterback hunter for somebody in the NFL.
Love the coming with a different angle on that one. If we're just talking pure pass rusher, because most of the other guys can hold up and do more than their own in the run game as well. So that's why they're going in the top 5, if not number 1, number 2 overall in most drafts. So very, very interesting. Any kind of pro comp you could throw out there?
Yeah, there's a couple. He's kind of a similar height weight that Cam Wake was coming out of Penn State, but he's not nearly that powerful. I really compare him to a similar player like our own Trent Cole, coming out of Temple and playing for the Philadelphia Eagles, kind of being an undersized edge rusher, but being very athletic, really good change of direction, can win a variety of ways. I really see that type of player and that type of play profile.
Literally the hunter. So,
literally the hunter. Yeah,
exactly.
I thought Ben did a good job of painting the whole picture there with Rump because to me, I would say like in terms of making that argument, the guys that are going to be able to post those double-digit sacks are the guys that are going to be out there all 3 downs. They've just got more opportunity, but I thought Ben did a good job of kind of painting that full
for
picture
more of a
there
recency comp, I guess maybe Harold Landry coming out of Boston College 2 or 3 years ago. Similar issues, similar type of production, similar ability.
That's a good one there. All right. So unless anyone else has any thoughts on Chris Rump, I'll jump in with my take here. So C-Mac, I want you to close your eyes. Think of the Pitt Football Panthers. All right. So you got those dark blue jerseys. You got the gold shoulder pads. Okay. Defensive lineman, 6'2", 290 pounds, wearing number 97. You might think of Aaron Donald, but there's another guy that was just extremely productive last year, a second-team All-American for the Pitt Panthers last year as a sophomore, and that is defensive tackle Jalen Twyman. 2019, the only defensive tackle in the country with double-digit sacks, was one of the most productive players returning to school this year before he opted out due to COVID-19. So I'm going to go back to kind of with this discussion, C-Mac. I'm going to go back to a coach's masterclass segment that I did on PhiladelphiaEagles.com with the Eagles defensive line coach, Matt Burke, this summer. And we talked about breaking the art of the pass rush into 3 phases. Talked about the get off, the top of the rush, like your hand usage ability to win, and then that ability to close. And to me, I think Jalen Twyman, especially when comparing to all 3 of the guys we're talking about today, but really with all the guys that we're talking about in this class, I think that he checks the box in all 3 areas. All right, so you talk about get off. Jalen Twyman's got outstanding snap anticipation. He's got that initial quickness. The kid flies out of his stance. He's able to win off the ball. Then you get to the second phase, the top of the rush. He's got a few tricks in his bag. He's got a really quick swim move. He's got a double hand swipe that's really effective. He's got that Superman cross chop that everybody in the league is trying to perfect right now. We see Aaron Donald try and do it every single week. DeMarcus Lawrence has kind of patented that move down in Dallas. He's got a push-pull move. He's got a bull rush. But more importantly, C-Mac, at the top of the rush, this kid is smart. He has got a well-developed pass rush plan. That's something, I covet on defensive linemen, especially guys that would be designated as pass rushers. This guy he's got counter moves. He can string together multiple moves better than Rousseau, better than Rumph. He also looks like he's got a bead on blocking schemes. I talked about this in our ACC preview over the summer. He understands where the offensive line is going to slide pre-snap. He knows how to attack the protection. So I think when you're looking at Jalen Twyman, this is a smart player with initial quickness and the technical refinement you're looking for. And then that third phase, that ability to finish, that is the hardest. That's the one that's a little bit harder to find than the other 2, in my opinion. Jalen Twyman has the ability to close in the backfield. He, number one, and I know, Ben, you love this too, he never loses sight of the football. He has always got his eyes on where the ball is. He's got great eyes for it. And then you've got that ability to finish where you talk about that quickness and change of direction I mentioned earlier, but then you're talking about the balance to navigate through traffic, get into the backfield, and get home. He won from multiple techniques. He lined up everywhere from 0 out to the 4-eye. He's got a pass rush plan. Certainly, again, more than the other 2 players I feel like we've discussed today. He's very effective on stunts. He creates sacks for others, so it's not just his production, which was very good last year, but what he did for others along that Pitt defensive line a year ago. He's violent on contact. This guy is an NFL starter, in my opinion, the best pure pass rusher in this draft.
Are you his uncle, Fran? Jeez, what a representation. I'm starting to look up the notes here. He might be his godfather or his relationship. Or
his uncle was actually Parnell
Motley.
Yeah, Motley from Oklahoma, now Tampa Bay Buck.
That's right.
C-Mac, I just have one point there. Jalen Twyman had a really impressive 36 pressures last year with those 11 sacks last year.
What about his defensive ends?
You know who had 62 pressures? His teammate, Patrick Jones. He might not even be the best pass rusher on his own team. Not to mention Jones had 62 pressures on less snaps than Twyman. So nearly doubled up his production on less snaps. I'm not sure Twyman might not be the 3rd best pass rusher on his own defensive line.
Ooh,
I see. When I watch him, though, like I said, he creates for others, man. He, with what he's able to do with getting into the backfield and creating opportunities for his teammates. To me, Twyman just really, really stood out from a technical standpoint and from just his FBI as well.
Just so the podcast listeners know, Fran's holding up a shirtless picture of Aaron Donald to try to sway Chris McPherson now. Just
I don't know what that would have to do with sway me right there. But
I just don't know if the Aaron Donald nostalgia is going to sell the full package here, Fran.
That was well done. I was going to say, is the check in the mail, or is he opting out for COVID? And are you getting the check? Did you already cash it as the agent? Or
I'm cashing that check, and Ben is cashing the QB1 checks every single week.
Got to pay the bills.
So very, very nicely done. What I love about this discussion is that the pass rushers can come in all different shapes and sizes, different styles, different techniques, where they line up along the line of scrimmage. I think it's great that it's not like we're just talking about, outside linebackers who can rush the passer, or 4-3 hand in the dirt defensive ends. It's, they have 3 different types of players here to choose from, and they're all very, very tempting. And I know with Dane and Rousseau, I think Greg Rousseau seems like the more traditional one. I like how Ben came in with the pass rush specialist with Chris Rumph. But Fran knows, it's sort of like with him and cornerbacks. I know when he gets excited when you talk about guys who have pass rush plans. Okay, that's like one of his big things when scouting pass rushers. So you have someone with the size, you have someone with production. Again, I think those are the things that carry over when you look at top pass rushers in today's game is, do they have the athletic traits? Have they been productive? And it seems like Jalen Twyman checks the boxes. So, Fran, I'm going to give you your first one here.
I got the makeup call. All right.
A little bit of makeup call. So, but nonetheless, though, it was a very, very passionate argument. I just want to see fire. That's all I want to say. Just sell me on these guys. I want to, pop in a little Panthers tape now and check out Twyman.
C-Mac, this team, though, you're picking, you're going to have to roll with these guys for the next 10 years. So we'll be checking the receipts.
That's fine.
Oh, yeah.
That's perfectly fine. So it's all good. I'll put it out on Twitter. You can do freezing cold takes on me all day
First
long.
sack of Chris Rumpf next year, right? If it's like week 3 in the NFL, you're getting a message on Twitter. Like I told
Please,
you.
you're gonna send me like mini camp highlights, okay?
Yeah,
You're gonna send me like, look at get 2-hand touch on the quarterback. So
something
no,
for us to all expect next year, certainly. Well, C-Mac, thanks again for joining us. Ben, Dane, thanks so much for joining us once again here on the Journey to the Draft podcast. Talk to you guys again soon. Before we continue with this episode, I've got a question for you. Did you know that 4 years ago, 100 million people did not participate in the general election? That's the same size as the entire U.S. television audience for the Super Bowl. That is an insanely high number, and it's something that we as a nation need to fix. Important decisions that affect each of our lives are made not just by the presidential election, but by our local elections as well. And if you don't vote, then those decisions that affect you are going to be made by voters who may not share your values, may not share your priorities. So if you don't vote, you give away your power. You give away your voice. It is so easy to get registered to vote, and it's just as easy to double check on your registration. Do you know how I know that it's that easy? Because I just did it over the weekend. All you have to do is text Eagles to 26797, and you can either register to vote or you can check your registration status. It is super easy. It's really fast. And most of all, it is extremely important. So please, it is all of our civic duty to make sure that all of our voices are heard. Get out and vote on November 3rd.
Now it's time to hear from you, the fans, in the Draft Mailbag.
All right, so we're going to kick things off with our draft mailbag. Again, the best way to support this show is to go into Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. Leave us a rating, leave us a comment. If you leave it a question, I will answer it here. And our question this week comes from the Scouts Doubt, longtime listener, left a 5-star review saying, "Hey, Fran, I think you've said this before, that Carson Wentz was your second highest quarterback prospect that you had ever graded behind Andrew Luck. My question is, how does Trevor Lawrence grade out compared to your Wentz grade?" And that's a great question. So just looking at where I've got Trevor Lawrence right now, I think that obviously it's a little bit of an incomplete evaluation on my end because I still need to do a lot more work, both on the field and off the field on Trevor Lawrence. We have another full season still for him to be able to play. But that being said, just kind of looking back over my rankings and the way that I kind of view players right now, Andrew Luck back in 2012, I thought was as pretty much everything you want from the quarterback position. Carson Wentz, I kind of viewed it in a similar light. And I loved Carson Wentz coming out of North Dakota State. Everything that you saw from a trait standpoint, everything that we knew from him off the field. I loved everything about Carson Wentz. Joe Burrow actually would be my third, in that list. I loved everything we saw from Joe Burrow. Obviously a smaller sample size. I didn't think that the arm talent was quite what you saw from Luck and Wentz and even with Trevor Lawrence. But I mean, just, obviously you can't argue with what the guy did over the course of last season, that last calendar year with LSU. And then look, I just saw him in week 3. He really looked the part. He did an outstanding job in that game against the Eagles in week 3 at Lincoln Financial Field. After that, that's where I would stack Lawrence right now. And again, that could go up, that could go down, but that's kind of where I view Trevor Lawrence right now. And then full disclosure, I had Sam Darnold as the 5th, just kind of how I viewed those guys all coming out of college. That's kind of how I see it right now, but we'll see. Trevor Lawrence, extremely physically gifted. I mean, there's not much to say. We say this a lot when we talk about the elite prospects in this class. The guy's good. He's really talented. He's got an outstanding arm. He's athletic. He has all the off-field traits. I mean, the guy has won everywhere he's been from high school to college. He's lost like 2 games in his entire career since his sophomore year of high school. It's something silly like that. The guys are really, really good prospects. So that's kind of how I view Trevor Lawrence at this point. But no, good question there from the Scouts Doubt. And again, if you got a question, make sure you go leave it on our Apple Podcast page or Stitcher. Leave us that rating, leave us a comment or a question. We'll answer it right here on the show. Great stuff this week from Chris McPherson. Better than usual, maybe because he gave me the W here this week. Great segment from CMAC, Dane, Brugler, Ben, Fennell. Make sure you guys check us out later this week. Ben will be back. We've got another Ben joining the show, a little bit of a teaser for what we've got later this week. Ross Tucker will be back as well. So excited to keep things going here on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.